I'm Erica. I'm 28 years old, and if you're waiting for a fairy tale, this isn't it. I used to dream of my wedding day like every other girl. Smiles, fresh flowers, soft music, and a man looking at me like I was everything. But in reality, I stood there at my own ceremony, blood dripping from my nose onto my wedding dress, under the stunned gazes of the guests, after my mother punched me straight in the face. And my sister, she had just torn my wedding dress right in front of everyone. I used to think the greatest pain in life would come from losing a man. I was wrong. The deepest pain is realizing that the ones who gave you life, who grew up with you, are the first to destroy you in public, and still don't see it as wrong. But to help you understand why I walked down the aisle with a family like that behind me, I need to go back to the beginning. Back to when I was just a little girl living in a house with 3 women. My mother, Marcia, my younger sister, Mira, and me, Erica, the eldest daughter, the quiet one, the one easily forgotten. My mother was a strong, fierce woman with influence in the local church community. Everyone respected her. But inside her own home, there was an unspoken system of favoritism. Mira, 2 years younger than me, was born with striking looks, sharp features, bold personality, and me, frail, pale-skinned, soft-spoken. Mira was the spotlight my mother couldn't take her eyes off. I was more like the backstage manager, handling homework, cleaning, cooking, making sure everything ran smoothly without a single word of praise. Mira has such leadership potential, my mom would say when Mira raised her voice at home. But when I spoke up, Erica, don't embarrass people with your behavior. At every holiday, Mira was the center of the celebration. I was the one doing the dishes. The day I received a full-ride scholarship to college, Mom just said, that's nice. But don't forget to help Mira pick out her prom dress. When Mira was crowned prom queen, the whole family threw a party. I sat at the corner of the table, eating cake like a guest. I used to believe that if I were more obedient, quieter, and worked harder, Mom would finally see me. I used to hope she'd notice how hard I was trying. But the truth was, I was never enough. Not as pretty as Mira. Not as interesting as Mira. Not worthy of pride like my sister. When I had my first relationship with a classmate in college, Mom simply said, "Don't be stupid and get pregnant." When I broke up because he cheated, she told me, "It's because you weren't attractive enough for him." Every time Mira went through a breakup, Mom would rush to comfort her, curse the guy, and always tell me, "You should learn from Mira. Be strong and know how to demand what you deserve." Demanding things. I tried that, just once. When I was 23, I asked my mother for permission to study abroad for my master's degree on a prestigious scholarship. She looked at me. "And who's going to take care of the house? You want to leave Mira here alone? Don't be so selfish." I folded the acceptance letter and tucked it into a drawer. Much later, while cleaning the house, I discovered that my mother had found the letter and torn it to pieces. I met Jake at my first job after graduation. He worked in planning. I worked in finance. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk like a movie star, but he was the first person to look me in the eyes when I spoke. The first to ask, "Are you okay?" and actually care about the answer. We started with short lunch breaks, book talks, and secret hand-holding. And one day, after I came back from a family party with tears all over my face, because my mom scolded me in front of everyone for forgetting Mira's birthday cake, Jake hugged me for a long time and simply said, "You don't need to be enough for anyone, you already are." I broke down in tears, not from pain, but because for the first time in my life, someone told me I didn't have to bend over backwards to be accepted. I brought him home one Sunday evening. Mira was watching TV, feet on the table. My mom came out of the kitchen, drying her hands with a towel, eyes scanning him from head to toe. "Good evening, ma'am," Jake said politely, extending his hand. "I'm Jake, Erica's boyfriend." My mother didn't shake his hand. She just nodded. Boyfriend? Pretty average. Then turned away. Mira scoffed. Oh, you have a boyfriend. I thought you were focused on your career. Jake stood there, slightly stunned. But me? I wasn't surprised. We were together for 4 years before Jake proposed. No roses, no fireworks, just a quiet evening walk, and he stood in front of me and said, I don't want you to ask anyone for permission to be happy. I want to be the one to do that with you. I said yes before he even opened the ring box. I thought, this would be the moment my mother would change, that she'd finally see me as a worthy bride. I was still naive enough to believe that. I asked Mira to be my maid of honor. I believed that despite our differences on my wedding day, she would set aside her jealousy and stand by me as a sister. When I announced the engagement, my mother simply said, Are you sure? Jake's not the kind of man who can support a family. He has no solid background, no tradition. I wanted to scream, You've never once asked if I'm happy. But I didn't say anything. I just stayed silent. At the engagement dinner I organized myself, Mira raised her glass with a half-joking, half-savage tone. Best of luck with your first marriage. Let's hope Jake doesn't change his mind halfway through. Jake stood up, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, We don't need luck. The table went quiet. I squeezed his hand under the table, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my own family. Jake and I decided on a small but warm wedding, a simple, beautiful ceremony in the suburbs of Brookhaven, surrounded by gardens, white flowers, and soft golden lights. We picked the invitations ourselves, ordered the cake, negotiated every vendor on our own, and I, the girl who once feared the spotlight, was excited to choose my wedding dress. I didn't know why planning the wedding made me feel so powerful. Maybe because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking Mom for her opinion. I didn't ask Mira if she liked this or that. I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel joy. I took photos of every dress, every flower sample, every little detail, and saved them in a folder titled, My Own Wedding, No One Else's. Vivian, Jake's mother, was the opposite of mine. She was gentle, kind, and never interfered. But whenever she saw me tired from the pressure, she would hug me and say, Erica, you don't have to force yourself to be accepted. If you're happy, that's all that matters. I cried right there in her kitchen while tasting the wedding salad. I began to realize my worth didn't come from my mother or Mira's recognition. It came from how Jake looked at me when I wore my old pajamas, from how Vivian cleaned the dressing room for me without saying a word, from every friend who called asking what I needed help with. For the first time I thought, maybe I really am worthy. I spent 3 months searching for the right wedding dress. Not right by trend, or Mira's taste, or my mother's standards, but right for me, the person I had become after years of learning to love myself. I wanted a long-sleeve design, made from soft, flowing fabric, with handmade lace, not too revealing, not overly princess-like, but just enough so that when I walked down the aisle, I'd feel radiant. I tried on 19 dresses in 7 different boutiques. Each time, I took photos and sent them to Vivian, the only person who asked how I felt in each one. Not, it looks nice, or what would Mira think, but, do you feel like yourself in it? And then, I found it. It was hanging in a small showroom in Brooklyn. Warm lighting, a faint scent of lavender in the air. I remember the dress clearly. Soft tulle like morning mist, a bodice adorned with hundreds of tiny pearls forming a bateau neckline, hand-embroidered lace along the sleeves and hem, each thread shimmering like early dew. When I stepped out of the fitting room, the light reflected off it in a soft, almost surreal glow. I stood there looking at myself, not the girl overshadowed by her radiant sister, not the woman who needed permission to wear something beautiful, but a bride. I didn't cry, but I smiled, and it was a smile I'll never forget. When I showed Jake a sneak peek of the dress, a tiny part, just to keep the wedding surprise. He looked at me and said, "That's the most confident I've ever seen you look." I laughed. "You sure? It's more expensive than anything I've ever bought for myself." Jake didn't blink. "If it makes you walk like a queen, then I think it's not expensive enough." I knew I couldn't keep it from Mira forever. She was still the maid of honor. And I still held on to a naive hope that, just once, Mira would drop the rivalry and stand by me as a real sister. I invited her and my mom to the boutique to try on bridesmaid dresses and to show them the photo of the dress I had chosen. Mira arrived 40 minutes late, iced coffee in hand, looking like she was headed to a party, not a dress fitting. I placed a printed photo gently on the glass table. "This is my dress," I said softly. "I hope you can choose a bridesmaid dress that complements this style." Mira glanced at it, smirked. "It's fine, but don't you think it's a bit much? With your basic figure, I think something lighter would suit you better." I froze. My mother said nothing. She sipped her tea like she hadn't heard a thing. I took the photo back, folded it, and for the first time in my life, I didn't justify myself. I simply smiled. "I didn't choose it because you thought it fit. I chose it because I felt beautiful in it." After the fitting, my mother walked over to where I was near the front desk. She leaned in and quietly asked, "How much is that dress?" I answered honestly, no need to hide, "Almost $13,000. She squinted. "You think this family has money to waste on things like that? Or are you planning to make Jake pay?" I took a deep breath. "I've been saving for 2 years. It's my money, and I chose to invest in my day." My mother said nothing more. She walked away. The sound of her heels was soft, but colder than her words. In the days that followed, I handled almost everything on my own. Mira sent scattered texts. "I'm busy, just send some random dress samples I'll pick later." My mother made excuses about charity work to avoid the planning meetings. In contrast, Vivian quietly stepped in. She drove me to see flowers, guided me in choosing fabric for my robe lining, even called me late at night just to say, "Don't forget to eat during all this. You're prone to low blood pressure." I was moved to tears by those simple gestures. I used to think things would settle as the wedding day approached, that an event this big would make my family, my mother, my sister, put their egos aside, that in the spirit of love, they would at least pretend to care. A week before the wedding, Mira came home, late, unannounced. No greeting, just a sentence. "If you need anything from me, email it. I'm busy." She brought 3 suitcases, one for shoes, one for party dresses, and one just for skincare and accessories. "How long are you staying?" I asked. "It's your wedding week," she shrugged. "Can the maid of honor really be absent?" Her voice was light, but I could feel something beneath it. A slow melting ice, cool and quietly venomous. On the very first evening, as we were arranging the seating chart, Mira leaned back in her chair, phone glued to her hand. "Where are you placing your college friends?" I pointed at the chart. "The row near the windows." She frowned. "And where am I?" "Left of the stage, across from our relatives. One of the best spots." She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "You actually gave me a good seat. Who would have thought?" I looked up. "What do you mean by that?" She sighed. "You know, I'm still the most striking among your friends." The room went quiet. I sat up straight. "Mira, this is my wedding, not your show." She scoffed. "You talk like you never wanted to be the center of attention." I folded the seating chart. Didn't argue. I knew Mira's verbal jabs too well to take the bait. I told Mom what Mira had said, hoping, just hoping, for one word of defense. My mother shrugged. "Your sister's just blunt. Don't be so sensitive." "I just want a little respect." My mother looked at me like I was a complicated problem. "You always make a big deal out of everything. She's your sister, Erica." I bit my lip. I had heard that phrase my entire life. She's your little sister. As if being the eldest meant I had to absorb every insult without ever pushing back. On the day of our pre-wedding photo shoot, Mira showed up completely off dress code. Everyone wore soft pastels. She came in a tight red dress with a deep neckline. When I gently reminded her, Mira smiled. I just wanted to add some personality. During the shoot, Mira made sure to stand right next to me, directing her gaze toward the camera like she was the star. Every time Jake put his arm around me, Mira would jump in with a comment, "You look short from that angle." Or, "Tilt your head the other way, it hides your wide cheek." At the end of the session, I turned to her. "You don't need to come with me anymore. I'll handle the rest alone." She shrugged and turned away, but I caught the faint smirk at the corner of her lips. That night, I walked past Mira's room and saw the door slightly ajar. She was sitting on the bed, zooming in on a photo of me in my wedding dress. I held my breath. Her eyes moved from the skirt to the bodice, pausing at the pearl-encrusted neckline. She exhaled with a hint of laughter, then muttered, "Pretty, but not on you." I froze. It felt like someone had grabbed me by the throat. I backed away from the door, quietly, so she wouldn't know I had heard her. I went back to my room and lay there in the dark. For the first time, I felt real fear. Not fear of what she might do, but fear of how plainly malicious she had become, and how no one, not even Mom, seemed to see it. In the days that followed, my mother became a stranger. She talked more with Mira, about her evening gown, about whether they should invite certain church acquaintances. As for me, she didn't ask what I needed, didn't ask how I felt. When I asked her opinion about the opening song, she simply said, "You decide. It's your wedding." The day before the rehearsal, I overheard Mom whispering to my aunt in the kitchen, "She's throwing a wedding like she's some rich heiress. That kind of thing doesn't suit everyone." I swallowed hard. Even on the biggest day of my life, I was still being seen as someone trying to be something I wasn't. Each of Mira's words, each look from my mother, none were explosive, but added together, they were like tiny stabs, bloodless, but they still hurt. Jake noticed. One night when I was unusually quiet, he held me close. "You don't have to invite them if they don't make you feel loved," he said. I shook my head. I didn't invite them out of love. I invited them because I once hoped they would love me. Jake didn't answer. He just held me tighter. We rehearsed one last time in the garden. Mira looked around and whispered, "This place is beautiful. I almost can't believe you picked it." I turned to her. "Are you happy, Mira?" She raised an eyebrow. "Happy that you're getting married? Or happy that for once you think you're the main character?" I didn't respond. I turned away. But in my heart, I had already begun to prepare for the worst. Wedding morning, the sunlight of Brookhaven streamed through the frosted glass, casting shimmering rays across the wooden floor. I woke up earlier than usual, not out of nerves, but excitement. Today, the day I had imagined 1,000 times in my head, had finally arrived. Everything was perfectly prepared. Bridesmaid dresses were steamed, flowers delivered on time, hair and makeup scheduled down to the minute. Most importantly, my wedding dress had been delivered to a designated dressing room, a private space, reserved only for the bride, locked, and accessible only to me and assigned staff. I had imagined walking into that room, gliding my fingers across the lace tulle, slipping the white gown over my shoulders, and looking into the mirror with a sense of completeness I'd never felt before. But I didn't expect that. Rather than stepping into a dream, I was walking into a nightmare. I approached the dressing room with a smile still lingering on my face. As I reached for the doorknob, everything seemed calm. But as I turned it gently, the door swung open from the inside. Mira was standing there. She was zipping up her handbag, a vague smile on her lips. "Mira? What are you doing in here?" I asked, unable to hide my confusion. She shrugged. "Oh, I thought this was the bathroom. The layout here is so confusing. I narrowed my eyes. There's a sign outside that says, bridal room. She stepped out, her gaze lingering on my face. Turns out this room is smaller than I expected. Then she turned and walked away, said nothing more, but her voice echoed behind her. Small, but it suits you. As soon as the door shut, I turned and froze. The wedding dress. The dress I had chosen, saved for over 2 years to buy, now lay draped over a chair like an abandoned body. The lace beneath had been shredded. Pearls had been yanked out and scattered across the floor. The silk bodice was slashed, long, jagged, and malicious. This wasn't an accident. It couldn't be an accident. It was deliberate. A message. You don't deserve this. I dropped to my knees. My trembling hand touched the edge of the fabric. I didn't cry, didn't scream. Just an overwhelming emptiness collapsed inside my chest. A young staff member knocked gently. A girl in her 20s, hair in a bun, entered with a smile, then froze. Oh my God, she gasped. I looked up, my eyes unable to hide the rising panic. The dress. It was fine yesterday. Mira, my sister, she just walked out of here, I said, like in a daze. The staff member hesitated. She said she wanted to prepare a surprise for you, so we stepped out. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need proof. The look Mira gave before leaving was enough. That smile. The way her hand brushed over her bag strap, like she had just completed something deeply satisfying. My hand clenched around my phone. I dialed Mira's number. She picked up after 2 rings. What now? What did you do to my wedding dress? Silence, then a laugh. You're still obsessed with that dress? It looked awful from the start. You ruined it. Why? I heard my own voice tremble. Mira sighed. Maybe it's karma for your arrogance. Did you really think that dress would turn you into someone else? What are you even jealous of? You always think I envy you, but you don't get it. I am the one people notice, and yet you picked a day to try and make yourself the center, and you failed. I'm going to tell everyone. Got any proof? She replied, mocking. Go ahead and tell them. Let's see who believes you. Then she hung up. I was still sitting there, in that wrecked room, when another knock came at the door. It was Vivian. She walked in, eyes scanning the room, and she understood instantly. I didn't have to say a word. She looked at me, then the dress, then back again. It was Mira, wasn't it? She asked gently. I nodded. My tears still hadn't fallen. Vivian came closer, sat beside me, and placed a hand on my shoulder, very gently. Erica, I prepared for this possibility. That's why I brought something. I looked up, confused. She placed a long wooden box wrapped in white velvet in front of me. When she opened it, I nearly stopped breathing. A wedding dress. But unlike any I had ever seen. The dress was made of Italian silk, with hand-stitched lace and Swarovski crystals. High neckline, long sleeves, tailored to flatter the body while retaining timeless elegance. It wasn't extravagant, but it radiated a quiet, breathtaking grace. It shimmered like a lake at dawn. This was my wedding dress, Vivian said. I wore it the day I married Jake's father. It was worth over $400,000 when it was new, and we've kept it preserved for 30 years. I stammered. I can't possibly. Vivian smiled. It's no longer mine. I've always waited for the day I could pass it on to someone who truly deserves it. I choked up. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, just stand up, put it on, and walk out there like no one ever tried to dim your light. I changed in silence. Every layer of fabric, every line of lace, felt like it was sewn to mend something inside me. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a girl desperate to be seen. I saw a woman, steady, confident, radiant in a way that no one could take away. This dress wasn't my original choice, but maybe It was the one fate had chosen all along. I never thought I could walk in light like this. The real kind, not the spotlight shaped by others' expectations, but one created by my own choices. As the chapel doors opened, I walked down the flower-strewn stone aisle, wearing the wedding gown Vivian had preserved for 3 decades, an haute couture design of Italian silk, hand-embroidered lace, and crystal embellishments. It felt light as air, but strong as armor. Every eye turned toward me, not because I was trying to draw attention, but because I had finally stopped trying to hide. I saw Jake standing there, head tilted slightly, eyes glistening with tears. I saw the astonished looks of the guests, and on the left row, I saw Mira. She didn't clap, didn't smile, just looked at me like she was swallowing something bitter. The ceremony went smoothly. Simple vows, my favorite song, Jake's hand trembling as he slipped the ring onto mine. Everything was beautiful, just like a dream. The reception began as the golden hour touched the edges of the trees. Strings of lights sparkled, ivory tablecloths flowed, champagne glasses glowed like honey. I stepped down to soft music, feeling a kind of freedom I'd never known in my childhood. I thought, maybe the worst was over. I was wrong. I was talking with Jake's relatives when Mira interrupted. Her bright red bridesmaid dress clashed completely with the neutral palette I had requested. But by now I had learned to overlook her petty choices. "Still playing Queen, are you?" she said loudly, enough for nearby guests to turn their heads. I turned slightly, spoke softly. "Mira, don't do this." "Do what? I'm just asking. Who do you think you are? A princess? Tiara? Lace sleeves? Italian silk? It's too much." Jake turned back, but I signaled him not to interfere. "Are you done yet?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I haven't even mentioned how you've stolen the spotlight. I've always been the one people look at. And now, you stand here, in a dress that's not even yours, thinking you deserve it?" Before I could respond, Mira stepped closer. In a flash, she grabbed the back hem of the dress, where the delicate lace was fastened with intricate hooks, and yanked hard. I heard it, the rip, the sound of threads snapping, fabric tearing, gasps from the crowd. The dress slipped off one shoulder, a strap fell completely. My back was exposed, the bodice shifted, nearly revealing everything. I lunged forward, gripping the fabric with both hands to hold it in place. I saw a flash. Someone had taken a photo. Someone saw. Everyone saw. A primal, raw humiliation surged through me, not because of what had been exposed, but because my dignity had been shredded. Jake instantly took off his jacket and wrapped it around me, shielding me from the crowd. "Are you insane, Mira?" he roared. Mira stepped back, smirking coldly. "Just reminding you, you were never the main character." Everyone stood still. No one said a word. And then, through the crowd, my mother, Marcia, appeared. She pushed her way to the front, brushing others aside. I looked up, hoping for a word of defense. Just once for her to stand by me. But no. Marcia looked at me, then at Mira. "Erica, what the hell are you doing?" she yelled. I froze. "Mom, who do you think you are? A princess? Expensive clothes? A wedding like a movie? Just to make a fool of yourself in front of everyone?" "I didn't do anything wrong," I shouted. "Shut up!" And she slapped me across the face. Hard. Sudden. I staggered, nearly falling into a table. My cheek burned. My head spun. Guests stood in shock. Someone shouted, "Get the manager! Call the police!" Jake rushed over, catching me. "Have you lost your mind?" Marcia pointed at me. "She's my daughter. I have the right to discipline her." "You don't have the right to hit anyone," Jake shouted back. Mira laughed like she'd just watched a comedy. "The world finally sees who you really are." At that moment, Jordan, the event manager, arrived, flanked by 2 security staff. "We saw everything, and the cameras caught it. I'm calling the police." Jake held me close, still gripping the torn part of my dress. "Are you okay?" I whispered. "No. I'm fine." I was guided to the back area. Blood trickled from my lip. My dress hung torn at one shoulder, but I didn't cover my face. I didn't cry. I sat down, looked straight at Jordan, and said, "I want to file a police report. I'll be pressing charges for assault and public humiliation." When the sound of police sirens echoed through the arched gate, guests scattered, leaving the courtyard of the wedding like a crash site. Not a crash on a road, but at a wedding that was meant to be filled with flowers, music, and joy. But some moments in life must break for us to see where our boundaries truly lie. And that night, my boundary finally became clear. 2 police officers, one male, one female, entered the main wedding area where guests stood scattered, stunned, and waiting. The event manager, Jordan, led them to me, while a venue medic tended to the wound on my lip. The female officer knelt to my level and spoke gently. "Hello, I'm Officer Natalie Ramirez. Can you confirm that you wish to press charges?" I nodded. "I want to press charges for assault and intentional public humiliation against both my mother, Marcia Taylor, and my sister, Mira Taylor." Officer Ramirez nodded, her tone calm and professional. "We've taken statements from the event manager and several witnesses. They confirmed the incident happened in front of over 100 people. We also have access to the venue's security footage." The officers approached Mira first. She stood by the wine tower, still defiant. "Wait!" Mira shouted as the glint of handcuffs appeared. "I just pulled her dress. It was a joke. It's my sister's wedding." The male officer replied curtly, "You're being charged with intentional destruction of high-value personal property, public humiliation, and disruption of a civil event." "High value? It's just a few $100 dress," Mira scoffed. Jake stepped forward, his voice cold. "She destroyed 2 wedding dresses, one worth nearly $13,000, the second, over $400,000, the crowd murmured. Mira's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're kidding me? 400 grand for that ripped thing?" I lifted my head. "Not ripped. Torn apart by you. In front of my husband's family, my friends, and everyone who once believed I came from a decent family." Then came Marcia. She stood tall, unrepentant. "I'm her mother. She was disrespectful. I was disciplining her. Officer Ramirez, you assaulted an adult. In public. You had no right. You will be detained for investigation under second-degree assault." Marcia screamed as the cuffs clicked shut. "You ungrateful brat. You'd put your own mother in jail? Who do you think you are?" I stepped forward, dried blood at the corner of my mouth. I looked her in the eye. "I'm your daughter. And today, you showed me that no longer means anything to you." Mira and Marcia were led to the police car under the confused and strangely relieved gazes of the remaining guests. No one stopped them. No one defended them. Not a single word from the family. My whole life I believed if I ever spoke up, if I stood against my mother or sister, the world would turn its back on me. But when I finally did, the world didn't turn. It just stayed quiet. And sometimes silence is its own form of taking sides. Jake sat beside me in a makeshift dressing room. The medic confirmed I had a split lip and mild temple concussion from the blow. But the deeper pain was internal. Jake handed me a cold compress, gently pressing it against my bruise. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't stop them in time." I shook my head. "You can't stop someone who planned to hurt you." Then I looked him in the eye. "Do you still want to marry someone whose wedding just turned into a crime scene?" Jake paused, then smiled. He didn't answer with words. He lifted my hand, pressed a kiss on the bruise. "I'm not marrying this wedding, Erica. I'm marrying you. The strongest woman I've ever known." Jordan, the event manager, entered, holding a USB drive. "This is all the security footage. I've extracted a copy for you. It shows everything. Mira ripping the dress, Marcia hitting you, the guests' reactions. If you pursue legal action, this is your proof." I took it. "Thank you," Jordan nodded. "You don't need to thank me. You did what most people never dare to do. Defend your dignity at your most humiliated. Officer Ramirez returned with the forms. I signed the official complaint. In the report, I detailed 2 counts of severe property destruction, wedding dresses, intentional physical assault, public humiliation and emotional harm at a private event, presence of witnesses, and visual evidence. When I finished signing, my hand trembled, not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in my life, I was rewriting my own role, not a victim, but the honest witness to my own life. 6 weeks after the wedding, drenched in blood and tears, I walked into the courtroom with steady steps, not trembling ones. Though my heart still ached like a wound yet to heal, I knew I had crossed the line to the side of freedom. I sat between Jake and my attorney. Behind me, Vivian, my mother-in-law, sat quietly in the audience row, holding a small leather handbag, her gaze glowing like a silent lantern. Across the aisle, Marcia, my mother, wore a dark gray suit, her face expressionless. Beside her, Mira, my sister, kept smoothing her hair, her lips painted red as if the trial were a press event. The judge was a stern-looking, middle-aged woman. As she entered, everyone stood. For the first time in my life, I sat across from my mother and sister, knowing with certainty that this time they could not interrupt me. My lawyer presented the charges. Mira Taylor, 2 counts, intentional destruction of high-value property and public disturbance. Marcia Taylor, aggravated assault and providing false testimony. Evidence: security footage from the wedding venue. Testimonies from 6 witnesses, including the event manager, waitstaff, and photographer. Professional appraisal of the torn wedding gown, $418,000 US. Photos of my facial injuries and emergency room medical report. The defense weakly countered, claiming the actions were emotionally driven and that the complex family relationship should be resolved through mediation. The judge looked up. Ms. Mira Taylor tore her sister's wedding dress, not once, but twice. The second time in front of a crowd, on camera, and with witnesses. Do you deny this? Mira gave a crooked smile. I, at the time, was overwhelmed with emotion. The judge interrupted. You are not mentally ill. You were not directly provoked. Your actions were deliberate. I stood. My heart raced. But I knew if I didn't speak the truth today, I'd lose my voice again. I looked toward Mira and my mother. I'm not the perfect daughter. I'm not the sweetest sister. But I did not deserve to be humiliated on my wedding day. My dress torn, my face slapped until it bled, called the thorn in the eye. My voice cracked, but I did not cry. I don't want them in jail. I just want them to understand. What they did was wrong. And I deserve to be protected just like anyone else. Mira's attorney tried to spin it. Your Honor, the defendant Mira felt overshadowed by her sister on the wedding day, and her actions reflect an emotionally driven bout of jealousy. The judge frowned. Jealousy does not justify criminal behavior. Marcia's attorney was colder. Ms. Marcia is a mother, and sometimes managing emotions around one's children. The judge cut him off. She did not discipline her child with advice. She physically struck her daughter, who was wearing a wedding dress, at a party with hundreds of witnesses. Marcia, even then, showed no remorse. She simply said, "She embarrassed me." She needed to be reminded of her place. The courtroom fell silent, but in my mind, only one word echoed. Enough. The judge stood, voice firm. Mira Taylor is sentenced to 3 months in jail, full financial restitution for the damaged wedding gowns, and mandatory attendance in a course on personal boundary violations. Marcia Taylor is sentenced to 1 year in prison without parole, must undergo anger management therapy, and is prohibited from contacting me for 5 years unless given written court approval. I didn't cry. I once believed that ending a family relationship meant loss. I feared the silence, feared the calls that would stop coming, the messages that would no longer appear. But strangely, when it all stopped, I didn't feel empty. I felt peace. A rare peace I hadn't known in all 28 years of my life. No more criticisms, no more of my mother's syrupy questions. Are you really going to wear that? Or Mira's jabs. Who would even show up to your party? Just me and the peace. After the trial, I temporarily moved into Jake and Vivian's home for a few weeks. Vivian didn't speak much. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. But every morning, she left a hot cup of tea on the table and a note. Erica, don't forget to eat lunch today. Vivian. One afternoon, as I sat by the window, lost in thought, Vivian gently approached, carrying an old cardboard box. These are my memories, she said, and I want to share them with you. I opened it. Inside were hand-sketched wedding gown designs, small fabric swatches, faded photos of brides from years past, and even a notebook titled Bloom Bridal, The Unfinished Plan. You know, Vivian said, before I became an accountant, I once dreamed of opening a bridal shop. But then Jake was born and everything changed. I set that dream aside. I looked at her, then back at the soft fabrics and unfinished patterns. Do you think I could carry on that dream? I asked. Vivian smiled. Not carry it on for me. Make it your dream now. 3 weeks later, Vivian and I signed a lease for a small space in the old district of Brookhaven, an old studio that used to be a dry cleaner. We cleaned it out, painted the walls ivory white, hung sheer lace curtains, placed a small sofa set, and installed a full-length ceiling mirror. Jake helped install the lighting system, while I carefully rebuilt the dress racks, each hanger hand-polished. We named the shop Second Bloom Bridal, a second bloom, a name that held two meanings: Vivian's dream reborn and my life renewed. One early spring afternoon, the doorbell chimed. A young woman walked in, shy and hesitant. She wore an oversized blouse and clutched a printout. My name is Lonnie, she said. I'm getting married, and I don't think I could wear a dress like this. I looked at the photo, a fitted gown with lace sleeves and a deep V neckline. Why do you think you can't wear it? I asked. She blushed. Because I don't have the perfect body. I've been to several shops, and they all looked at me like I was delusional. I reached out my hand. Here, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. I spent 3 weeks designing a new dress, inspired by the original photo, but with a softened waist, slightly lifted shoulders, lace down the sleeves, and a silk lining that made the wearer feel light without losing form. When Lonnie tried the dress for the first time, she cried in front of the mirror. I've never seen myself look this beautiful, I cried with her. Not because of success, but because I knew that feeling. The feeling of being seen for the first time. Not just by others, but by yourself. Every bride who walked into my shop carried a story. A woman betrayed by a boyfriend, another forced by her mother to conform to standards, one who thought she wasn't beautiful enough to wear white. I listened to them. I didn't just sew dresses. I mended the tears inside them. I worked gently, carefully, because each stitch into fabric was also a stitch into my own healing. Each time I tightened a corset string, pinned a piece of lace, I whispered inside, we are worthy. Not because someone says so, but because we believe we are. Vivian suggested I display her heirloom wedding dress, the one I wore when I stepped out from the lowest point of my life. I placed it in a glass case in the corner of the shop, under a soft spotlight. No price tag, not for sale. At the base of the dress was a brass plaque. This dress was once torn, but the woman who wore it stood tall. It is proof that dignity cannot be unraveled. Jake stayed by my side. Despite work, he brought coffee to the studio every afternoon, helped mop the floors, restock supplies, or adjust the photo display screen. One time he asked, "Do you think you'll ever go back to finance?" I looked around. The rolls of fabric, the sketches, the bride's tearful, laughing eyes in the mirror. I shook my head. I'm doing exactly what I was born to do. Time passed. People say that wounds heal with time, But for me, healing didn't come from time. It came from choosing not to let myself be torn apart ever again. Not for anyone, not by anyone, not even by the person who once called me daughter. One Monday morning, as I was fitting lace around a bride's neckline, the receptionist came running up. "Ms. Erica, there's someone named Mira. She's downstairs, says she wants to see you. No appointment." I stood still, not out of fear, but because I knew this moment would come. I nodded. "Take her to the back lounge." The room was bright white, with silk curtains and a long sofa. I entered. Mira was already seated, thinner, her hair tied neatly, no red lipstick or tight clothes. Mira spoke first. "I got out of prison 3 months ago. I was referred to a job organizing storage at a grocery shop. No one wants to hire someone with a vandalism record." "I understand." I didn't respond. I just listened. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know I've watched that video dozens of times, and each time I clearly see what I did. Not just to you, but to myself." I set my teacup down. "So, what do you want from me?" Mira bowed her head softly. "I want you to know I'm no longer jealous of you. I don't want to hurt you anymore. I just hope you keep living the way you have. Kind and strong." I said nothing for a while. Then I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once tore my dress in cold rage, that once looked at me with scorn as I cried. "Mira," I said softly, "I don't hate you, but I don't need you to come back either." Mira nodded. She stood, walked away, and didn't look back. Marcia, my mother, didn't write, didn't call, didn't send a single sign. I didn't reach out either, but sometimes I wonder if one day she stood at my shop's door, would I invite her in? I don't know, and I don't need to know. My healing no longer depends on whether they change. It lies in the fact that I no longer need them to feel whole. One evening, I was alone in the studio. I walked past each gown, ran my fingers along the folds of fabric as if touching the stories of hundreds of women. I sat in the chair before the mirror, took out a piece of white lace, a remnant from the dress torn that day. I laid it in my hand, then smiled. No more pain, no more resentment, only gratitude. I am Erica. I was once beaten, humiliated at my own wedding, treated like a shadow unworthy of love. But today, I am the woman standing in her own bridal shop. No one can shame me. No one can break me. All they did was show me that I no longer need them to move forward. And that's the most beautiful revenge, not through retaliation, but through survival, whole, radiant, unapologetic.